Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tracy Noah from the Marion Library Service. Welcome to our Library Through the Lens live webinar, part of our series of adult programs delivered differently. Today, thanks to Affirm Press, we welcome Melbourne-based illustrator Nash as he talks about his hilarious and insightful debut book that brings new light to the Australian immigrant experience. Nash is joined in conversation today by journalist and member of sweatshop literacy movement Daniel Noir, whose work has been published in the New York Times, SBS Voices, Meanjin Quarterly and Eureka Street. Please feel free at any time during the presentation to type questions you have for Nash into the Q&A or chat feed on your screen, and Daniel will ask these throughout their talk. Now please sit back, grab a cuppa and welcome our special guests, Nash and Daniel.
Thanks, Tracy, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm so grateful and excited to be here today. Nash is a Sri Lankan-born multidisciplinary designer artist based in Melbourne, where he's lived since 2012. His work is both cynical social commentary and an account of his personal experience as an immigrant, the other in any society. What to Expect When You're Immigrating is his first book. I'm the son of Egyptian migrants, a journalist and a writer, and it's my privilege to be speaking with Nash today. And this conversation, as Tracy mentioned, is brought to you by Affirm Press and the fine people at Marion Library, and we thank them for their support. Nash, how are you feeling?
Not too bad, not too bad. I mean, it's been a few months since the book came out, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Do you generally receive these kinds of conversations in a kind of Oxford-style library? Because that's the impression that I'm getting.
Oh, currently? Well, I think my partner said that I would look a lot more intellectual if I was against a bunch of books.
Sure.
And I think save a couple, most of them are hers, so you'll have to thank her for making me look.
It reeks of good taste.
Well, yes, I do trust her to make good choices. I'm with her, so I suppose that's saying something.
I also wear these glasses just for cosmetic reasons. I have no need.
That's fair. I should have brought my glasses as well then.
Well, should have, but that's fine. That's in the past.
That's okay. Now. The books, it would be overkill if I had the glasses and the books, I suppose.
That would be too much. We don't want to put the reader or the viewer offside. We want to feel accessible. Nash, I'm going to tell those tuning in, our wonderful audience, a little bit about your work. My parents migrated in the late 60s, and I think I'm still unpacking the impact of that experience, of that upheaval of their lives. Not everyone listening or watching, rather, has necessarily gone through that experience themselves, but by way of demonstration, most of us have moved house. The excitement fades. We realize maybe that the furniture doesn't fit, or that we don't like the neighbors very much, or that the heating doesn't work, or that the electricity is really expensive. When you move to an entirely new country, and when it's you and not your furniture that doesn't fit, what does that mean for you? When your qualifications aren't recognized, and when the weather is brutal, or the neighbors yell at you to go back where you came from. So your book is a new take, I think, on a common story, maybe on an old story. And that story comes fresh somehow in your skillful hands.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
And I want to know, in this kind of compelling, myth-busting expose, if you like, this combination, it's something between a how-to guide for new arrivals and those who welcome them, as well as a memoir of your own. I want to know first about your own experience. So can you please rehash for me, just briefly, what it was like, especially those first few days, and tell me about the reasons why you left Sri Lanka.
Yeah, well, I obviously moved here to Melbourne to study a Bachelor of Architecture. So education did play a main role in moving countries and the opportunities that came with it. And I think for me personally, the freedom of being outside of Sri Lanka and being able to really focus on the things that I'm really passionate about and have the kind of independence away from family and the society that I've been brought up in was something I was craving and something I was looking forward to quite deeply. And clearly I've been able to grow into my own since I've moved here. And I mean, obviously there's plenty of people back home that really supported me and allowed me to get here, but just being able to grow into my own person, I feel like has been one of the biggest benefits since I moved here. Yeah.
But it must have been challenging, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, when you move to a different country, just like you said in that introduction of the book, you feel like an alien looking around. Everything is new, and coming from Sri Lanka and moving to the Western world, so to speak, and from the Western world, Australia sits in its own unique place, not just geographically, but culturally as well. So moving here from Sri Lanka was a slap in the face, so to speak. It does wake you up. And I think the first day I moved here, it was 44-degree weather. And I thought Sri Lanka was hot and humid, but getting out of the plane and coming out of the airport that day, it was horrendous heat. And I was trying to think about what I've gotten myself into.
Yeah. And then as that immediate kind of nuclear experience wore off, did the feeling of homesickness begin to set in?
I would say it did, not really at the forefront of my mind, I'll be honest with you. I think I was more excited and looking forward to the kind of next step in my life and, going into university, meeting new people, because besides my relatives that live in Melbourne, I didn't really have any friends who were here. So I was looking forward to actually meeting new people, like-minded people who are interested in the same things. Whereas when you're in high school, you're kind of lumped together with a whole bunch of people, lovely people, but still people who might have very similar experiences to what you might have had growing up. So, and being from a school that you're at the same school from the ages of 5 to 17, 18, we grow up together, go through the adolescence of our life together. You kind of know everyone like the back of your hand, and coming to a place where I don't know what the streets are called, I don't know how to get around, and I'm studying a completely new subject that I haven't, and it's going to be taking most of my time looking for work. I mean, it was an exciting experience that the pangs of homesickness didn't really hit immediately in the same way I guess someone else might experience it.
Yeah. Nash, it's so interesting that you say that it was jarring, because we celebrate our country, certainly our politicians do, as this kind of bastion of inclusion and diversity and a leader in this space. And we know in practice that is not the case. Even just flicking through the news of an evening will show you how heinous the treatment of asylum seekers in detention has been, how we stand in, contravention of international law. And we hear all of that. But from a more personal experience, from a more authentic point of view, can you tell me what it's like to be a newcomer in an Australian university? Which university was it?
RMIT, so Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. Yeah, it's in the Melbourne CBD. I mean, what do you say about the whole asylum seekers thing? It was, I think, 2012, 2013. At that point, there was a massive push for the closing down of the Christmas Island and the Manus Island, like the asylum centers. I would call them almost camps, would be a better term for it. And I remember going to Fed Square and, seeing all the billboards that said, let them in. And everyone had very strong opinions of it. And it was something obviously I was aware of before I got here. And like I try to mention in my book, the experience of past immigrants does shape the way you started viewing the society you moved into.
Yeah.
And the treatment of asylum seekers and such, it puts you on the back foot. It gets your defenses up, because to someone who's born and raised here in Australia, what really is the superficial difference between me, who might have come here on a plane, and someone who might have got here on a boat and managed to get into the mainland?
Yeah.
I look the same.
Exactly. I mean, on paper, admittedly, there is a difference. I think you're what's considered an economic migrant, whereas others maybe vie for, citizenship, or maybe asylum is a better word, from a more desperate standpoint. But nonetheless, I hear exactly what you're saying. And yet this isn't a sad book. This isn't a heavy book.
Yeah.
This is a funny read. This is a funny read. And I'm just so intrigued by the way that you can tell what is quite a devastating story in this novel way. I want you to tell us more about why you selected, you're an illustrator by profession. Tell us more about why you selected the comic book genre. I mean, does the comic or the comical make us see the tragic in a new way, in a novel way that maybe we wouldn't have seen it before?
Yes, it does. And beyond that, I think I was obviously grappling with two different ideas when I came up with the book. One obviously was looking back at my own process of applying for permanent residency, and going through the whole bureaucratic hoops that I had to get where I am right now, and all the money, the health checkups, all that. And also, the way race was taking a toll was really being pushed to the forefront in the last couple of years, and what big an impact that would have on immigration. So those were two things I was grappling with, but then trying to make that into, how would you say this, a poignant or concise, digestible, bite-sized book, while still making it funny. I found that challenge quite compelling. And the reason I used humor, besides, obviously, we could get into this later along the way, humor was a big part of how we used to process emotions back home in Sri Lanka, which is a lot more conservative, and you don't really talk about your own emotions quite outwardly. A way of processing certain tough situations would be through the use of humor. So the humor part of it was almost something I had decided on subconsciously without even realizing that was the way I would most of my artistic practice involves a sense of humor in it, and it does make things, like I said, digestible. And I mean, I do agree with you, it does help people to see the tragedy of it without being completely bogged down with maybe the emotion of the tragedy, and really see the situation for what it is.
Well, this does remind me of this particular spread here. It says, don't be afraid to show your feelings, and then it's a heart in a cage. It's actually encouraged. And if in Sydney, at least, if you're not in therapy, are you even a person? Exactly. It's the thing to be done. But I guess my question for you is, was there, and I'm getting, speaking of questions, audience participation here. And I was going to ask you a bit more about the process, I guess. But before we get to that, we do have something here from Dushi W. And he's asked, Nash, what advice would you give for people thinking of immigrating?
Okay.
I mean, to that, I would say buy the book, Dushi. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's a how-to guide, right? So it probably helped you half of the way. Besides that, understand why you're moving. And it's a long process, obviously. It's a long journey. And knowing why you are here will help you get through anything, right? Having that motivation at the forefront of your mind, knowing what you're working towards, and figuring out a country that is best suited to you is probably the best advice anyone could give with immigration. Besides that, I don't really know if I can give too much advice.
And again, Dushi, Affirm Press, available now, where all good books are sold. This book reminds me of something else that I rather like, called Persepolis. It's by Marjane Satrapi. She's a an Iranian illustrator who spoke about the revolution, the impact on her parents, and how the end years of the Shah and the beginning of the Iranian Revolution shaped her life. It's a funny book. It's wry. It's sometimes dark, but you get the feeling that it was hard won, that kind of humor. You know, that laughter came easy. It reminds us of that. I think it was Nathaniel Hawthorne who said that easy reading is damned hard writing. Was writing this thing cathartic for you?
It was. It allowed me to look back and to some extent be proud of the kind of process or journey of me being where I'm at, to be able to publish a book being an immigrant with not really having any connections or knowing how to go about doing such a thing, to be able to get a book published and be recognized as an illustrator. I mean, it was a good nostalgic experience for sure. But it also allowed me to touch on some of my own failings over the journey. Like, I'm sure I made plenty of mistakes on how I went about trying to handle things, having my defenses up for too long with the wrong people, or letting my defenses down around the wrong people. So it helped me process the journey. And I feel like for someone who's, being an immigrant, you're continuously working, continuously looking for your next job. You don't really have time to relax.
That hustle, you got that migrant hustle.
Exactly. And it's something every immigrant has. I mean, I would say most immigrants would have that. And to be able, this allowed me the unique experience of taking a bit of time and to process the journey and to make sense of it, and to some extent look towards what I might have to deal with in the future as well. Because towards the end of the book, I do talk about things like interracial relationships, being accepted into a family that could be from a completely different culture as you. Both the experience that I'm going through right now with my partner.
Tell us about your partner.
Oh, well, besides her being amazing, her name's Sarah. You
can see two kinds of versions of the family, and this is all you're going to get, by the way, viewer, because this isn't free. I mean, this is technically free. Thank you, Marion Library. But pay for the labor. But I can see here that there's a contrast here, isn't there?
Oh yeah. So the bottom picture
in cultures.
Yeah, so the bottom picture, obviously, is something I've experienced a lot more, because her family is actually here. And I think we took a picture with the extended family for someone's birthday. And I do look like a shadow in the background sometimes, because they're all blonde, blue-eyed, which, and she's an amazing person, and her family have been amazing in accepting me and helping me, settle in and making me feel accepted here. And I've never felt out of place. So
listeners, viewers rather, can you please send us your questions? Do it as they come up. You can use the Q&A function at the bottom of this Zoom call. And I think there is also a chat function. You can click on chat, and that should give you access to the action in real time. I don't know about you, but even living in the same city as my parents does sometimes feel like a battle of cultures, and I could get to their house in half an hour. But just being the son of migrants in this society, I think every day have to navigate a huge rift of culture and of perception. For example, living with someone before marriage, or moving out of house, or accepting cultural diversity and diversity in all its forms. So can we talk about our parents for a while? Sure. I want to tap into this idea of how we can appreciate the sacrifice, but forge our own path as the son, or rather as the children of migrants. Is that something that you've experienced, thinking about, well, my parents wouldn't handle it the way that I'm handling it, and actually we're quite different in our worldviews?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a conversation or a struggle that I've most first generation migrants would have to deal with. I mean, it's something that obviously started in Sri Lanka itself for me, because social media is like a little window into the immigrant experience before you actually leave the country itself, and you kind of know what's happening around the world and the way you might think about something and the way social media might shape the way you think about something. And because of the access you have to it that your parents might not have or might not have the means to get to, does create conflict. And having those conversations is sometimes difficult when you are, at least they were difficult for me when I was living in the same country. That kind of separation, maybe it is the old adage that says the distance makes the heart grow fonder, so it allows them to add a level of emotion to it that they'll be wanting to listen to what I have to say.
Yeah, sure. In a way, maybe that if you were there at their doorstep, they would dismiss you and say, "I don't know, what do you know?" But
if you're living under their roof, which is
exactly,
something. I remember my father saying, "You're living under my house, my roof, my rules," kind of thing.
Yes.
Which doesn't really open the door for a lot of conversation, does it?
No, not really. I think it's funny, isn't it, that you can live with someone but never really see them.
Yeah, and this happens with immigrant parents, I think, a lot more. Like you said, like we spoke about the immigrant hustle. As soon as the immigrant parents come here and they give this new life and the new opportunity to their children, but they need to maintain that life. They need to work extra hard because they might have been here for 1 year, whereas there's going to be families that obviously have been born and raised here who might be better off. And you don't want your children to ever feel like they're lacking in something. And
no, you never want them to feel behind.
Exactly.
And there have been so many migrant stories of the hustle, of this kind of unmitigated, single-minded devotion to work, which so many parents have to do. And they sometimes don't even see the children for whom they made this enormous sacrifice and took this risk because of the unending years of. Your experience, I guess, is a little bit different because you did what our parents did, and for my friends too, what their parents did. Whether you're the son of, or the child of Italians or, Poles or Arabs from across the Middle East or South Asians or whatever it may be, you're going through now what we went through then in the late 60s, 70s and 80s. So can we talk a little bit more then maybe about the experience in particular? Because you handle it in such a nuanced way. You handle it in such a subtle way. It would be easy to, slap someone over the head with this and say, be better, improve your culture, wise up or just see the world. But you don't do that, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I start from a point of, I guess, looking inwards. Because if you read the description about how it's you that doesn't fit and not your furniture. So it's not about how I didn't start from a point of view of like, the culture doesn't accept me. I started from a point of view of like, how am I not fitting into this culture? Because I moved into this society. And yes, there is, to some extent, the society does need to make room for, if they want to have a multicultural society. They do need to make certain leeways to allow cultures to integrate, to assimilate. But trying to find fault with the culture, the society you're moving into as soon as you get there is probably the wrong way to go about it, because you're already finding fault and not looking for the areas in which the society you moved into have benefited you or why you actually moved there. Whether it be, escaping war-torn countries or looking for better economic opportunities, whatever it might be, you moved here for a reason. So it's always good to be introspective and to look within yourself as a starting point. And from there, to start looking a little bit more outward. And I think in the book, I tried to really dig deep and see how the mistakes that I might have made, the kind of hurdles that I've had to get through. And then from there to actually go towards how might the society around me be reacting to how me moving in here and what I'm doing.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, I think there's great humility, Nash, in what you've said, and certainly I think that comes through in the work. And yet there's mockery too. I mean, one of my favorite parts is where you said everyone wants to know what visa you're on, you know.
Yeah.
And another is, you know, cultural appropriation is not always an homage, and something to this effect, you know, like let's say a vegan from Newtown dressing like a Central African woman. Both have the same dress, both are very different people, you know. We have a question here. We have one from someone who has preferred to go unnamed, and they are asking, you know, after the publicity that you've received for the book, would you change anything about it?
About the book itself? Well, funnily enough, the book was written, like the artwork and the writing was completed maybe a year ago, more than a year in advance, and it was supposed to be published in June last year, but 2020 is kind of like written off the calendar for most people. So as a result of which, yes, I mean, there are certain things I would spend a little bit more time exploring. And I think this was obviously before, we'll say, the George Floyd protests and before all the race conversation had really become heated and polarized the way it is now. I mean, it always was bubbling, but I feel like in the last few months of 2020 and middle of 2020, it really got real heated. And there was almost a kind of silencing of one side of the conversation sometimes. And so I would have liked to explore some of those topics a little bit more in depth. Something I would probably do maybe down the line. I am definitely interested in like what happens 1 year, 2 years after you've settled into the country, and how, you know, that could be something I explore. Would I change
the sequel? There's the sequel.
Oh yeah, what to expect when
what
you're
to project
settled
when you're immigrating.
Oh, there we go. I might have to give you a certain percentage of the book now.
We'll take this offline.
We'll talk this, yeah, for sure. Yeah, would I change anything of the book itself? Not really. I'm kind of happy with, I feel like it's balanced enough. The conversation is balanced enough in the book as a starting point. I don't look at it as an end all answer to everything. I don't think it's answering anything. All it does is raising certain questions and certain obstacles that you might see, face, experience that you might have. But I want it to be a stepping off point for, I guess, more honest, much more complex conversations that I can't really reduce into a single illustration.
No. So then, in hindsight, you know, and just considering what the work is, which is, you know, some of it is quite incisive, some of it's very cutting. You know, for example, this irony of equality, you know, and then we're constantly talking about equality, but there are people in this society who, you know, we don't treat as equals. You know, one in my experience has been the people of color who grow up in our schools and who we see in our places of work, you know, and the myriad microaggressions that we face every day. One very telling picture is the one of a man of color working as a barista in a cafe and handing a cup of coffee over to the police officer behind the counter, and you've written, "It's always scary when you meet the police." And I can certainly testify to that. You know, going down the M5, even the sound of a siren invariably feel like, oh no, well, this is how I die now. But then again, I'm very dramatic. But I want to ask you more about that. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't think I've felt like I'm going to die when I'm handing over a cup of coffee to a cop, but it's one of those things. Like I'd like to talk about why people feel that way, because that's a feeling we can all accept. Most people of color, especially men of color, especially if you've got a beard to some extent, would feel. The kind of jokes that you hear about, you know, you're going to get stopped at the airport. My mom, for example, wants me to trim my beard all the time.
Yes, I've heard this many times.
And I hear this from not white people. I hear this from my family and my relatives, and they're more concerned with me having a beard than anyone else. And the kind of stigma or the kind of fear that they have towards me being either identified as something or going through the experience of, being stopped, it's much more interesting for me to try and figure out why. And I don't know exactly why. I could name a few answers, but the fact that social media, movies, like, it does put this kind of chip on your shoulder, being a person of color. Sometimes most of the time warranted, sometimes unwarranted.
Yes.
Of the way we view, whether it be authority, whether it be the police, whether it be just the person seated next to you on a tram, because we live hyper aware lives. We're constantly looking out for a slight or misplaced word to kind of point the finger and be like, oh, this is why you're doing this, you're making me feel this way. But that sense of looking for it, the kind of paranoia is maybe a heavy word for it, but that sense of looking out for that is encouraged to some extent, and figuring out where society is failing to make people of color have to have that kind of sixth sense or spidey sense, if you want.
That hypervigilance, I think, my spidey, my Semite sense, in my case, my Semitic sense is tingling, you know, I can feel it. But Nash, I also just wanted to think about these more commonplace challenges that you face, waiting in line constantly. The reams of paperwork that you need to do anything in this country, the constantly being broke, never really being able to have enough to be comfortable, And I think these are experiences that are reassuring when we see them in print like this. We have another question here from Yasuko Shila. She asks to the both of us, and we'll start with you, please, is what have been the lowest and the highest point of your lives? And she's written as migrants. I am not a migrant. I am a second generation migrant, but go ahead. We'd love to hear from you.
The lowest. Obviously, I think you touched on a couple of them there, like being broke and being broke at some point or the other in my life has obviously been some of the lowest, and not wanting to, because this goes into a slightly different topic about we're growing up in a conservative or old school conservative background. There's a feeling of what a man should be, what masculinity is, and the kind of pride that comes with being a man, which we could talk in depth later if we have time. But one of it is being able to provide for your family and being the breadwinner, and reaching a place of being broke or of financial instability is not something that is pleasant for anyone, but especially someone with the kind of, and I'll be the first to admit, I've still got plenty of conservative values that have been an integral part of me as a result of growing up in Sri Lanka, and having to ask someone for money or relying on your parents or someone else, that I would say definitely would be one of the lowest points. Do
you hate paying rent?
Do I hate paying rent?
Because famously, every ethnic parent says rent money is dead money. They should have that printed on a T-shirt, because they say
should.
So much.
They should. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because for their generation, buying property, and even to date, buying property is probably a very sound, stable financial decision. Whether you can pull up enough capital to actually put that initial deposit down is a completely different conversation. Especially, here in the West, where I don't eat avocado toast. I really don't. And I still don't have enough money to put down a deposit on my first house,
That's right. That's right. And we spend so much on avocados. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, well, I get avocados at work for free. Hopefully the owners of the bar I'm working at aren't listening. But,
don't say that. No, don't say
Mm.
that. They'll come barging down,
You're going to start moving to Melbourne real quick. All the
Yes.
avocados. Yes.
Oh my God. How much do they cost now? Like $20 a fruit?
Something like that. I mean, you know what surprised me? It was limes. Limes for some reason, like $95 like a tray, like a 5 kilo. Yeah, that was crazy.
How
Anyway.
much will a lime set you back in Sri Lanka? Like if you did the exchange, the equivalency?
Well, I wouldn't know I wouldn't really know, because there was a stage at which we had both avocado and lime trees at home. So
okay, surplus.
Yeah, so we had plenty to go around, and I remember enjoying avocados. Like in Sri Lanka, we used to eat it as a dessert rather than almost a savory thing.
We do that too. Yes, Arabs do that too.
Oh, yeah, there we go. And even dates and such, like, I'm a big fan of that. I haven't really got around to eating that here, probably because avocados are so expensive.
Come to Sydney, Nash. I will sort you out. Yeah.
All right.
There's a place called... Anyway, we'll take this offline.
Yeah, that's for later.
That's for later. All right. So we're waiting for, we're welcoming more of your questions. You can submit them through the chat function, or also you can pop them in the Q&A at the bottom of this Zoom call. I will tackle Yasuko's inquiry. For me, I think, to be honest, I don't really know if the lowest and the highest point. Well, as the son of migrants, I think the highest point has been realizing dreams that were unfeasible for my parents.
Yeah.
To have some kind of acclaim in the arts in Sydney, as a writer, and to be able to any accolade that I have is really a testament to their sacrifice and to their commitment, and it makes things sweet in a way. And I wonder sometimes if I would have the drive if it wasn't for this consciousness of the cost of my being here,
Okay.
Because every morning in primary school and also into high school, I remember I would see my dad get up very, very early in the morning, like the crack of dawn. Before then, like 4 or 5 in the morning, and he would drive down the driveway and he would go to his business in the city, and I wouldn't see him till like late at night. And I think that does something to you, I think that gives you a consciousness of your place and of some kind of a sense of purpose. And I'm grateful for that. I mean, on the other hand, I think maybe that the corollary, the other side of that coin, is that you're constantly trying to prove yourself, constantly asking.
I can definitely relate to that for sure. I think, I had a question for you as well, but before I get into that, which was, the kind of wanting to prove yourself as not only being an immigrant, but for me, obviously, I came here to study architecture.
Yeah.
And I'm not studying architecture anymore.
Yeah.
Neither am I working in the field. I'm pursuing a career as an artist, illustrator, author, whatever it might be. And the fact that I've obviously got this chip on my shoulder to try and prove not only to myself, but my parents back home that this can be successful.
Is it a chip? Is it a chip on you? You feel self-conscious about being an illustrator?
To some extent, yes. I mean, it took obviously them a while to stop asking me to go back into university and study my master's, to stop asking me when I'm going to start applying for architectural. It took them a while, and I was almost ashamed to some extent, to be able to say I'm an artist. I mean, my mom recently, I had to renew my passport, my Sri Lankan passport. And she was adamant that I took my degree certificate and went to the consulate so that it says architect on my passport and not, artist or bartender or illustrator or whatever it might be.
Yes. Do your parents love honorifics, the title before your name? Can I tell you the favorite honorific for the
doctor?
The whole exactly.
Yeah,
the whole
my
nation of
sister's a
Egypt.
doctor, so I'm very proud of her.
The whole country of Egypt. There are 110 million people, all doctors, you know, and like the kind of doctors that couldn't really help you in a crisis,
like a dermatologist or something like. I mean, they're
no. They wrote a thesis about engineering.
Okay. So they would love for you to get a doctorate in something. Okay.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Nash. It doesn't. Just the point is get that title, doctor.
Get that title.
You know,
okay.
And put it at the end of every email. You know, like even if it's just like an Easter gift, you know, or you're sending some dumb joke, you know, about Trump, sign off as doctor.
Yeah, so this leads into that question that I really want to ask you. Did you feel there was a certain level of achievement-based affection in your family growing up?
Oof, the first cut, the deepest.
Yeah.
So that would be a hard yes. And I don't know that I don't think they recognize that that's what's happening, you know, but of course the whole community is about, you know, where people are at, because they have I think there's a subconscious feeling of competition between all the children, you know. This one's a lawyer, this one is a doctor, you know, this one's
you just named my family right there. My sister's a doctor and a lawyer, so there we go.
And then don't even get started when it comes to families, like that domestic unit of accountability is sometimes even more fraught, you know. But then in other ways I feel like there is no support system as profoundly loving and intense as ours, certainly as mine. My friend said to me yesterday, your problem is that your family love you too much, you know.
You must have good friends there. Just start off a conversation. Do you know what your problem is?
Yes. No, again, I mean, that's he also signs off as doctor. But anyway, so that would be the high and the low point there. Thank you, Yasuko Schiller, for your question. And I tell you what, Yasuko, from your name, I would love to know your ethnic situation, because it's an interesting name, Yasuko Schiller.
Fair. I'm not even going to try and guess where.
And I'm not going to try either. I'm not going to try, Nash, but I want to, but I'm not. We'll take that offline. So we have a little more time here.
That's okay.
We've spoken about the comic book genre. So can we discuss a little bit more just about the mechanics of making these precise, I think very nuanced. When I say nuanced, what I mean is that the faces in your drawings have this quality of humanity that is sometimes quite surprising, because you see things in a cartoon that maybe you don't see in or maybe that it's harder to see in a person. There's an element of precision in the facial gestures and the expressions that I think is really nice. One that really got me was there's a picture of a South Asian man speaking to a white woman, and then in a speech bubble above his head it says, some people won't be able to feel you, or rather to hear you, no matter what you're saying. And he's talking about global warming, and she has her hand on her mouth, and is imagining Apu from The Simpsons.
Okay, well, I think there's a few parts there, but if you start from the beginning, which was the illustrative aspect of, you try to capture the emotion that you really want to be portraying. So as a result of which, you do end up exaggerating certain features to kind of really showcase that emotion itself. I think I use humans, but I do dehumanize them to some extent to kind of try not to make them too realistic, so that they still are symbols. For example, I'm not sure if you read the graphic novel Mouse, that deals with the Holocaust, where all the Nazis were cats and all the Jews were.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, they've won. It has won multiple awards, kind of thing. But they do, the author there, I can't remember his name currently, but what he does is to really try to use by making them animals. I think there's a word for that. You've kind of taken that emotion that you might see with just seeing harrowing pictures of, photographs of the concentration camps out of it, and make the message clear. So I think that's what I tried to do in this.
And that's that speaks to Sean Tan's The Rabbits.
Yep. Yeah,
which is another graphic novel.
Very similar. Funnily enough, I was speaking to my publisher today about my next children's book, and Sean Tan came up. So
well, and again, that is using the distance and the objectivity that animals can bring to talk about very human failings, very human ideas such as good and evil, and his was about the genocide of Indigenous people and first Australians in this country. So okay, so Nash, that sounds like it was quite a process that was full of potential. Is that fair?
The process of starting the illustrations, yes, for sure. And I think you can take it many ways. I just chose the closest thing to my experience, which was immigration. It's a fruitful practice for sure.
I want to return to this topic of how do cultural differences make us interesting and give us a quality of uniqueness that is attractive, And the reason I bring that up now is we have actually had a question to that end. So it's from Nathan Baz, and he's asking, sometimes I feel better, this is very funny, than white people because I'm ethnic. And he says, I come from a background of community. Does that make me a bad person? And I'm fascinated by that question. I'm fascinated by that question.
That's a very complex question, and I would love to spend a whole another hour talking about it, because there are multiple layers to it. There is that feeling of feeling better. It could come from the kind of giving. It could be earned significance on your race, or it could be someone blowing smoke. Do you get what I mean? So there are two ways. There are two ways to look at it, and you need to be able to understand what is bringing about that feeling of superiority, and what aspect, or is it just a general feeling of superiority that you feel? There's the line between, I guess, appropriation and fetishization of culture, and putting people of color on a moral pedestal that's been happening recently. I'm not sure if it's the best way to go about building up your confidence in your race, or in your own in yourself.
Because it kind of reinforces in a way that the othering, because you distance yourself somehow from humanity when you say, oh, I'm better than them, or that they're worse than me.
Because I still prescribe to Martin Luther King's kind of ideal, or his dream of living in a colorblind society. That is kind of what I would think as being equality, where the color of your skin is as insignificant as the color of your hair. But obviously there are many steps that need to be taken before we get there. And the process of getting there, there are so many paths to take to get there. Racial essentialization, I'm not sure is the best way, because it leads to more segregation, I would say.
No, I hear that. I certainly hear that, Nash. But what I would say to Nathan Azi's question, he's corrected his surname, is our peers and our neighbors teach us things about ourselves. I mean, that's something that I've always appreciated about how talkative my parents were with the older Australian gentleman across the street, and the Asian family to our left. They were Chinese who lived immediately to our left. That there's a newness and insight that comes from the difference in their perspective. It's true that the sense of community that I have, certainly as an Egyptian, can sometimes feel suffocating. and
Yeah.
overwhelming in its intensity, and it can cross the line from concern into creepiness, you know.
Yeah.
And I say that, you know, I think that's an experience that's not unique to my culture. And so what I appreciate, no, what I appreciate about my Australian friends is that level of detachment that they have with their parents and with their immediate family and with their relatives, that there is a notion of boundaries that I think can be quite instructive and quite useful and refreshing if we can take to it. And then maybe vice versa, you know, the concern that we have about the well-being of our siblings and about our parents. And these are things that kind of can nourish, not to sound too saccharine about it, or too sweet about it, but it can nourish the whole society. You know, we can be better.
Nourish everyone, yeah. I mean, there's a saying in Buddhism that says, the more perspective you have, the closer you are to the truth. And I think that's what we should be aiming towards if we, you know, classify ourselves as a multicultural society. Learning from everyone around you. And you say from your white friends, you learn how to be detached and become independent from a very young age.
Yes.
But from the people of color communities, you learn community, and you learn about respecting elders, learning from them. There's so much that you can learn from everyone.
Yeah.
I feel like by either looking at a certain group or a group based on the immutable characteristics as being either lesser or superior, you have a tendency of alienating them and not learning the lessons that you could from them.
Yes. No, I absolutely hear that. And I think it does kind of speak to this other challenge of fetishization, which is the worst kind of exchange. Should we talk about what that has meant for you? The difference between an authentic embrace when people make space for you, and when people fetishize you, celebrating you in a kind of in a problematic way.
For example, I think there are 2 pages in the book. One that are related. The saying is, not everyone's going to be happy to see you, and the next page says some people might like you a bit too much.
Yes, exactly. In a hypnotic way, when they say, look at my Sri Lankan friend, or look at my Egyptian friend.
You become tokenism and virtue signaling is a mainstay in society currently, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you walk into, we'll say, a bar or something, I see this all the time where they be white people or other people of color, they have a tendency of coming and greeting the person of color in a group as a way of signaling that, oh, I'm cool with this. You get what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And also, like, there's also the kind of unearned significance on their opinion that happens for sure. Like, I've experienced that quite a bit recently when I'm having conversations. For example, I have conversations with my publisher or someone like that, or other people who might know so much more about life than I do. But the fact that they assume not my publisher here, Martin's amazing, but people have a tendency of assuming because I'm the token brown person of color in the conversation, that I have something more to say and my opinions valid so much more than theirs, even they might have experiences that could speak about that topic a lot more.
Yes.
And that leads to a false sense of confidence and false sense of importance that we should really stay clear from. And that's something our parents did, which is they were never given prominence. So they had to work really hard to get any sort of respect and a place in society that they've achieved. Obviously, the path is a lot easier for us, and especially recently, the fetishization aspect of it.
Maybe it's also challenging in another way.
It is.
And thus, to that end, we have a question here about these challenges for new migrants. So someone's asked, what advice can you give to migrants who are here in Australia on their own? And then this person said, quite interestingly, we were lucky to have family around us, which makes me think that they're a long-term migrant, or that they're the child of migrants. How do you guys help others, or maybe suggest to help others that aren't so lucky?
It would be, I mean, the best advice you would give any migrant would be, especially if you're younger, say like I was, 17, 18 when I got here, is to be open to experience, open to experiencing what life has around you. Because it's very easy to find people from the same background that you've come from. And obviously when you have family, obviously you've got this inbuilt social network that might have a lot more of Sri Lankan, for example, families integrated into it that you end up getting sucked into. But being open to learning from the people around you is definitely something, and making your own mistakes. Like you are going to make mistakes, and hopefully the book helps you avoid some of them. But be open to making those mistakes, because that's how you learn. Because if you live a sheltered bubble-like life, like, are you really going to come out of it happy? Are you going to be, do you feel like you're a part of society here, or just a part of that one suburb that you live in?
That one house, even worse.
Yeah. It could be just that one house, so.
Yeah. Oh, Nash, thank you for that. And what I would say, I think, is that, really, I think check in on your neighbors.
Yeah.
I know that sounds like a slightly trite thing to say, but it's true, like be available in the community where you are, rather than do what I think so many of us necessarily do sometimes in our challenging, busy lives, is to hop online or to connect to people halfway across the world through an Instagram post, rather than to know what's happening in your community. Also, who your local member is. Write to them when something is wrong, and especially when it's something of importance to refugees and migrants. I mean, there are several controversies, and rightly so, about the way the Australian government has treated asylum seekers, and you have it within your power to challenge that. So write to your local member, know who they are, and don't be quiet about it. I guess use your citizenship. That's how you can help.
And use your language skills as well. I feel like that's something I've done, because I was lucky enough to be brought up speaking English at home, so I didn't find the transition from Sri Lanka to here as hard as some other people might have, because I spoke English the way I do.
Yes.
I have my parents to thank for that. And when I was here, there were plenty of people who, were tied into jobs because they didn't feel like they could speak up, ask for a raise, ask for better working conditions. And here I was at the front of house when they were stuck back of house, even they would like to learn something new, learn some new skills, but they were stuck there. So I think language skills and helping them get through that would be, more advice I would definitely offer.
Yes. Nash, we're kind of drawing to a close now, and I'd love to hear from you about this wonderful thing that you've made, this beautiful creation of yours. What do you hope for it long term? I mean, you'll be doing publicity, I think, over the next few weeks and possibly months, and then it's out there. So what is it that, and in fact, it is out there. What is
since
it
January, I think. Well, initially, obviously, I didn't think I was going to write. I didn't think I was writing a book when I started doing this. I was thinking of like maybe a social media post with New Yorker style caption, cartoon kind of thing. But now that it's a tangible collection of images and text. I want it to be like, obviously a how-to guide would be a very concise way of putting it across, but I want it to be a conversation starter, not just among immigrants, not just among the society who feel like, oh, this is another book that I should learn to be a good host or something like that. But actual conversations where the difficult topics, the conversations that are so much more, that people step around, that people walk around eggshells around, those conversations need to be had for us to be a society, because you might not reach a conclusion, but just the act of being open to having that conversation is the first step. We might not resolve any of these issues in our lifetimes for sure, but the first step needs to be taken at some point. And the first step needs to be taken by two parties that are willing to hear the other person out and to try and understand what they're saying, what their concerns might be. And that's what I want the book to be, a stepping off point for those conversations to be had.
It already is, Nash. And I refer you to the book in question. It's What to Expect When You're Immigrating. You can buy it from the website of Affirm Press, and our host, City of Marion Libraries, are going to share the details in the chat window of this discussion. Nash, this has been really inspiring for me. I'm grateful.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. And you've been an absolute pleasure to talk to and listen to as well.
Well, thank you very much, audience. That's it from us. And we're handing it over now to City of Marion Library.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nash, for joining us this afternoon, and also to Daniel too, who shared some wonderful insights from his point of view as a migrant as well. And yeah, sharing with us this unique, definitely conversation starter for new arrivals to this, the lucky country, and yes, often horrendously hot country too. Nash, I do agree with you there. Can I tell you that? Yeah, sometimes the avocados are $1.50 each in Adelaide at the moment.
Sorry, what was that?
$1.50.
$1.50 apparently. What's that? A whole 50 cents less than what they are in Sydney right now?
Home ownership. Yeah. Here I come.
And Nash, if you do publish that sequel, which I hope you do, I really look forward to talking to you again about the sequel online with us at Marion Libraries. And I think Daniel said what to project when you're immigrating, or you could call it maybe what not to forget when you're immigrating, because by the sounds of it, you should never forget where you come from as well. So thanks again. And yeah, Nash's book can be purchased directly from the publisher at www.affirmpress.com.au, or you'll try a good local bookshop. We also have bought some copies for the Marion Library Service, so you can borrow those from the libraries as well. And please follow the Marion Libraries Facebook page, the City of Marion website, and check your inbox to be kept up to date on all of the upcoming Library Through the Lens presentations and workshops. We hope you will join us next time, and thank you again, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure.
No problem at all. Thank you. It's been ours.
Thank you, everyone.